Hey everyone, hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Shelly, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my top 10 contemporary reads of this year. Now, what do I mean by contemporary reads? Well, and they're also fiction books, okay? So because I had a top 5, I think, nonfiction books of the year. I ranked all of my classics, and then I had about 50% of my reading, which was like 70 or so books that I read that were from the time period of like 1990-ish to present day. And so I read quite a bulk, like the bulk of my reading was actually, newer releases, backlisted books, but nothing that quite fell into the classics category. And so this is what's left. They're like contemporary reads, and this is my best of the best. So hi, if you're new here, then hello. I think I'm just saying hello over and over again, but that's okay. I'm excited. I'm Shelly, and I love reading of all kinds. I have quite the eclectic taste, and my top 10 definitely reflects that. And so yeah, so here's what I'm gonna do. This is a ranked list. Oh, I was gonna say, if you also like reading and like to hear someone talk very enthusiastically about reading, if you want to be a part of this conversation, then I would encourage you to subscribe and stick around. This might be a trend for me, but I'm going to kind of slide this in. I'm gonna slide this in, and I wanna know, what was your favorite read of the year and why? I'm sharing my top 10, and I would love this to be a conversation, a back and forth. So please let me know, what was your favorite read of this year? And if it's your top 3 and you can't choose, then please leave that below. I just want to know. All right, back to the video. Okay, so I am going to be doing this a little bit differently. This is a ranked list. So 10 is at the bottom of the best. And then we're going to my favorite read this year. And I'm going to tell you why this book appealed to me as a reader. And so if you are also this kind of reader, maybe you can take something from that. So we're starting with number 10, which I actually don't have with me. And number 10 is 4 volumes of graphic novels. And it's the Heartstopper quadrilogy. What is it? I think in the bookish world we call it a quartet. So it's the Heartstopper Quartet, soon to be a quintet because the 5th book is coming out. And it follows a relationship of Nick and someone. I don't remember. I don't know how I could have forgotten. Okay, so it follows the relationship of Nick and Charlie. This is a very sweetly drawn graphic novel. That's like half of the charm. And it also very realistically and very, very sweetly, but not over the top romantic, it portrays a young couple in high school and figuring out their queerness and figuring out their identity and how to come out. And the sort of light tumult, it's not too melodramatic as some graphic novels can be, as some teenage sort of angstiness can be. Meaning that if the teenager is the protagonist, it can be quite angsty, that's what I mean. But it is more on the side of sweet and kind and heartwarming. And why did it appeal to me as a reader? Well, one, I really loved the imagery. I really love Alice Osman's artwork and the way that she portrays her characters, and draws her, just so sweet. And I feel like Alice Osman was really in love with the world that she built, and I think that definitely comes out in her style and in the way that she designs her characters. Also, I really love a love story. Like, I'm a sucker for a love story. I love things that are sweet. And this was sweet, but not too sugary, it wasn't cloyingly sweet. And so we really kind of walked that fine balance of being grounded enough to give you some meatiness of anxiety and relationships and the complexity of being queer, along with being incredibly sweet. Number 9 on this list is a fantasy book that took the internet and world by storm in the year that it was released, and then, the following year. Like, I felt like everybody and their mother read this book, and it really quite worked for me. And that is Susanna Clarke's Piranesi. This tells the story. This is all about setting. This book is all about setting. Again, it's a fantasy novel. It's set in a sort of a mansion, or it's set in this world that has all of these halls, and that is very almost like a labyrinth of a building. Building is like too calm a word for it. It is like a castle-like labyrinth that has all of these statues and has a main character that seems to be wondering why he's in this place. And what I loved about this was that it was very surprising. It was in many ways a quiet fantasy novel. There isn't, the main conflict isn't something that is really over the top and over dramatic, but it works so well. And I think that this is really touching the place in my heart that loves setting, because it was really all about the magic of the setting. And then this character, this main character that is kind of a little, I had to sit here for like a full minute to think about like how I would talk about this character of Piranesi, who is the main character, and then there's like the character of the other. It's very light on character, but what I liked about Piranesi was that he had this like childlike innocence as he is moving through this house, this castle, these corridors, this labyrinth. And there was something that I found very charming about him, but I really think that this book is just, for me, it's all about the image that I created in my mind through Susanna Clarke's words of an incredible and complex setting, which ends up being like really, I don't know, there's just like, it ends up having like this twist and turn. I just really like this, okay? But just know that for me, what made it like land on this list was definitely the setting. I think I said setting enough for this book. Coming in at number 8, I think. I'm like, my numbers on my notepad, because I kicked a book off the list. The numbers on my notepad and the numbers that I'm saying aloud actually don't correspond. They're moved, they're adjusted slightly. And so I'm like having to think every time I say the number. So just know that I'm like, am I saying the right number? Okay, so coming in at number 8 is going to be In by Will McPhail. This is another graphic novel that is about a young man who is socially awkward, who feels very insular, like inside of himself, and struggles to connect with others. And the thing that made it for me with this book is the humor. I did not expect this book to be so funny. And I think for some people, the humor doesn't work like, at all. But for me, I was like actually laughing out loud and like being like to my husband, Ted, listen to this. It's so funny. And he'd be like, that's funny. I'm like, but you have to experience it. And then it also is like touchingly sweet. And the whole point of the book is actually not just about the humor, but it is very, very sweet. And yeah, I was just so glad that this book came across, my desk, so to speak. I purchased it and that I took the time to read it, because I just, gosh, comic relief really holds a special place in my heart, and this really did it for me. Number 7 is going to be none other than the emotionally tumultuous, gosh, I was like gonna say something else, and then that's what came out, is the emotional tumult that Douglas Stewart put me through in his novel Young Mungo, which follows the story of a young man living in, gosh, I really should have looked at the inside flaps of these, because a lot of these I've read quite a long time ago. They hold a special place in my heart, but sometimes like the finery of the details are evasive to me. So anyways, this tells the story of Mungo, and he's living in Glasgow. That's what I had to look up. And there are these warring sides of the Catholics and the Protestants, but really what this whole conversation is about is the nuance of masculinity in the lives of these young men. And I just was so, I don't know, the love story that's in this is so sweet. It is quite a bit angstier than Heartstopper. There is a lot more going on, but it is yet another queer love story, and it is just so stinking sweet. There is so much that works in this book. It also has dual timelines or dual storylines, and then the way that they converge is just magical. And some of it is quite difficult, I'm not gonna lie. So this really kind of touched my heart of somebody of this appealed to me rather as a reader, because I do quite like a dark book. I do like a book that seems sometimes to be at that precipice of hopelessness and then brings it back and then you're like, just take me there, but give me something back. This appealed to like the little life soul, the book. This sits in the same spot. What am I trying to say? This sits in the same spot as A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, though definitely not as difficult of a read, but definitely has that darkness in it that you have to work through. But I quite like that sometimes in a book. And so young Mungo really gave that to me this year, and I really appreciated that. Number six, I know why this made the list. This is not going to be all muddled anymore. Number 6 is a book that has to do with the lunar cycle, with intricate plotting, and slow clap her. She deserves every single award that she won for this novel, because it is none other than The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton. Oh my gracious. So this tells a story. Gosh, I really need to like get myself together. That's right. Okay, so this is set in 1866, and it's telling the story of the gold rush in New Zealand, okay? I knew it was like the gold rush in some country that is not my own. And at the heart of it, there is a murder and missing gold, and that is like the barest of the bones, the wisp of the plot to come, because it just is incredible. And this appealed to me as a reader because of its intricate plotting. Great characterization. There is a lot in it. Like, the setting is great, the characters are great, but what is really making this book for me is the plotting. You really have to get in here and experience it, because it has a lot to do with I think the first section is 365 pages, and then the next section is exactly half of that, and then the next section is exactly half of that. And so it's like it winds down to a very particular point, and every section feeds itself back into the plot. It's just so brilliantly done. It is so brilliantly done. And I've heard, though I'm not one of these people, that if you are really into astrology and the lunar cycle, that it's even like more brilliant than those who don't understand it, like me, can pick up on, because she really like uses that as the structure of the plot. It's so good. Okay, like it's just so good. Quite a long novel, quite a hefty one, but nevertheless just an incredible one. And I'm so glad that I read it. Number 5 on my list is none other than the end of a trilogy. It is a feat. I mean, I read this quite early in the year, but I do know what this book is about. I did not forget it. And that is The Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel. Now, this is the conclusion of her Thomas Cromwell series, her Wolf Hall series, in which you follow Thomas Cromwell. And Hilary Mantel is someone who passed this year. I really do think she is one of the greatest living writers of our time, although she passed away this year, which really my friend texted me and she was like, Hilary Mantel died, and I was like, I just cannot. And so I was really glad to have finished the series this year, and I was really glad to have experienced her writing while she was still living. There's just something really special to me about that. And this is truly the conclusion of Cromwell's time as being King Henry VIII's advisor. And it is essentially his downfall. I was curious as to how this would end and to how she would pull it all together, and she does. It is incredible. And there are some scenes that really stand out to me. One of which is not a spoiler, one of which is that there are items in Cromwell's room that remind him of people who have passed, and he is essentially saying that just because I own these items and they call to me, there is this reminder that the hand of that person will never ever be back in the glove that sits on the desk, and that the necklace that sits on the boudoir or on the, you know, vanity is never going to hang on the neck of the person that I love again. And so it's like this bittersweet reminder of items of those who have passed. And that is one of the scenes that stands out to me, but there are just so many of these moments that are just like true pieces of art. She was just such an artist with her words. She knew her craft, Mantel did, and she gave us these books, which I am so grateful for. So what appeals to me about this book? Like, why did this appeal to me? And it's really the artsy-fartsy side of me, the art snob, the person who like really, really loves beautiful writing and just loves a beautiful turn of phrase and likes to like work at language. That's what she did for me. She just gave me like a beautiful piece of art that I could immerse myself in for days. And I'm really grateful for that. Number 4 was a book that I actually didn't read too long ago, but I'm so glad that I did. I really love this book. And it's interesting because a lot of people read it this year and it got quite a mixed reaction. And I was like, but I cannot deny myself the things that I love. And that is Percival Everett's The Trees. This was longlisted for the Booker and shortlisted, I believe, for this year. And this was my hope that would win, okay? Like, I really wanted The Trees to win the Booker, and it did not. But that is kind of what pushed me. The Booker was what pushed me to finally pick it up, though it was on my radar before it made the long list for the Booker. And this book is about an unusual murder in which, and this is not a spoiler, this happens at the very beginning, in which 2 racist white men are brutally murdered, and also there is in the same room as these bodies that have been just annihilated is the body of a black man. And so you're kind of wondering, like, was there foul play? What's going on? And that is kind of the thrust of this story, is like, what the heck is going on? But here's what made it for me. I really enjoyed the heaviness of the discussion about race, and primarily about crimes against black people that have been going on for years and that are just atrocious. So it's like this really heavy, difficult conversation. And what Percival Everett does is that he definitely immerses us in that conversation, but like every page is broken up with this like witty banter between the 2 detectives that go down to the South to investigate this crime that's been done. The banter is freaking hilarious. Like, I just loved it. I thought this was fantastic. After I finished reading it, I wanted my husband to read it. I wanted my friends to read it. And there is this moment in which there is this thing in which places, like true places in the South, are called out by this author that don't necessarily have a great reputation. And what my town's name was named by name. My town was named by name. And I was like, okay. But it was really interesting to see my town that I live in currently, like, actually show up in the print of a book, even if it may have not have been for good reason. But, that moment was delightful. And ultimately I just adored this book. Like, I just loved it. And if you can't tell already, I loved it because of the humor and the conversation that it was having, and being able to have a really difficult conversation, but also break it up with moments of reprieve that made me truly laugh out loud. Numbers 3 and 2 are actually a part of the same series, and I just finished the second book like yesterday, okay? But I didn't want to break up the duo because I really feel like it's a continuation of the same story. And I just loved it. It was so juicy and meaty and lovely. And that was Elena Ferrante's My Brilliant Friend and The Story of a New Name. The Story of a New Name is the second book in the series. I just finished it yesterday. And this tells the story of a friendship. It's set in Naples, in a very, very tiny sort of few block radius of a neighborhood in Naples that is very, I would say, insular, in that like a lot of people stay and grow up in the neighborhood and not a lot of people leave. And we start following this female friendship between Lenu and Lila. And we start their journey as they are very little children, like little baby girls, and their friends. Their friendship, right? And then you see the way that their paths start to diverge, and we're getting the perspective of Elena, or Lenu, and her path ends up being on a more academic route, whereas Lila's path ends up being more reflective of one of the older women older women as a collective voice, or as a collective path in the neighborhood in Naples. It is set in the 60s, like the late 50s, early 60s. And here's what appealed to me as a reader, was that it's told in first person, and you're getting this story primarily from Lenu's perspective, although you get Lila's perspective a little bit in the second book. And I felt like when I was immersed in these books, that I was sitting with a friend who was telling me her life story. And it kind of had this like cyclical, vulnerable quality, in which she is remembering the friendship that she had, or that she has, with Lila. I don't know how the story ends, so, yet. And I thought it was such a powerful story about the difficulties and the intricacies and the complexity of female friendship. And I'm not going to get too much into it, but one of the things that this inspired me to do was to reach out to an old friend that I haven't talked to for probably 2 decades. And that was really wonderful. And also just like, I just think that was a really powerful moment for me in my life, to take action based on something I felt inspired by, but feeling inspired by something in particular was truly like a wonderful thing. And what inspired me was Ferrante's 2 books. I know that for sure. I'm trying to like wrap this up in a nice, neat way before I get to my number 1. I know that Ferrante is very polarizing, and there are people that really love her. It's like Ferrante stans, like they're just like everything Ferrante, I love her so much, she's amazing. And then there are people who are like, I just don't get it. I don't get why people love it. I fall on the side of like, Ferrante's amazing, I love her so much, and I just will read anything by her, which is great because I have her other books down yonder right there. Okay, my number 1 book. Gosh, I had all different reasons for why these made the number, like the list. Like there was no repeats, that's quite nice. Okay, my number 1 book. So good, y'all. If there's one book you read next year, let it be this one. Oh, it is so good. I really hope it takes off here in the US, because I don't know, I don't feel like enough people are talking about it. Okay, my favorite book was Antonio Scarlati's M. Son of the Century. Let me figure out who this is translated by. So this is translated by Anne Milano Appel. All right, M. Son of the Century tells the story of Benito Mussolini, and we are following him just after World War I. So we follow him through the years of 1919 to 1924. This is the first book in a, what did I call it? A quartet. This is the beginning of a quartet. That word, quartet, like totally left my brain. Okay, so this is the first book of a planned quartet. I really hope that all of them are written and translated in English. I cannot wait for the second installment, but let me tell you what this is about. So this tells the story of the beginnings of Benito Mussolini's power, and what Scarlatti did is that he is giving Benito Mussolini like flesh on the bones. He is definitely fleshing him out. And so as you follow Mussolini, you don't sympathize with him. That is very, very clear, because Scarlatti definitely has a point of view and pokes fun at and is very tongue-in-cheek about the fascist movement in Italy during this time. He is not sympathetic about that. However, you get this picture of Mussolini that is a lot more full than I had ever seen. Not that I had seen a ton about Mussolini, but you get that he's somebody who, where he got his original idea, you know, where he saw opportunities, how he built his following, his insecurities, his lovers, which really kind of show a different side of him. You see when he's excited, when he's not, when he's fearful, and it really gives you more of a picture of who Mussolini was. But here was the really interesting thing, is that he does, like, Scarlatti does such a great job showing you what Italy was like during post-World War I and the attitude of Italians and why the Italians were so sort of set up to follow a fascist movement. It's a political thriller. It's like one of those things where it's like, it's such a hard sell because on the surface, it doesn't sound like it should be fascinating or it should be interesting. However, some of the scenes that played out in my imagination as I read this are so vivid. They're so powerful. I can see moments in this book with my mind's eye as if it played out in front of me like a movie. And that quality of feeling is just so stinking powerful. Like, it is just so powerful. But I think ultimately why this is my number one. One, I really like books that kind of make my brain work. There was a lot of flipping back and forth between the cast of characters and the main text. There is this interspersion in between every few chapters of nonfiction excerpts that support this fictional writing that Scarlatti did. But I think what the main thing is that it really helped contextualize some things that happened in the United States where I'm at. It helped contextualize some of the events that have happened and put it in like my living memory into a broader context of the world, which is pretty incredible. It's pretty incredible. So some of the things that I felt like I was opinionated about before, some of events that have happened before are now, like, I have a touchstone of things that have happened in the past that mirror what went on just a few years ago in the US. And I think that that's really fascinating. And so it's one of those things where the shorter, more brief way of saying this is that it broadened my perspective on the world in a very immense and impactful way. And when a book does that, when a book is able to do that, I am so appreciative. It's like one of those things that I feel like I'm going to carry with me. The lessons that I learned from this book, I'm going to carry with me for the rest of my life. On top of this being a very interesting read, on top of this being a very cinematic read, on top of this being a very intense read. So with incredible language, okay? Like, everything about it is amazing. So this is my number one read for the year, and that's it. So that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. Y'all, thank you so much for being here, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye, guys.